as we kind of go through. But yeah, so if you haven't been here before, welcome. This is our QIN, the Quality Improvement Network, and this is very much a place for people working at the intersection between research and practice. So it's implementation research, knowledge mobilization, but also how we do research that has impact for all of our participants and communities that we engage with. And so I'm very, very pleased to be able to introduce Ganesh Sathyamoorthy, who is going to talk to us a little bit about an ICS REN project. And we're just getting lots of people flooding in now, which is really great. Ganesh is Deputy Director of the Ethnicity and Health Unit at Imperial, but also works with HCL, Healthcare London, which is a GP federation. And I think now is building quite a portfolio career of doing lots of different things, which I'm sure he'll talk a little bit about. But yes, thank you everyone for joining us. The idea of these is very much that we have a short presentation and then a big juicy discussion, because it can be a very lonely place, this kind of intersection between research and practice. So it is very much about coming together, building a community of practice and talking about some of the things that we're doing, and then having a kind of juicy conversation about some of the challenges we're all facing and how we've solved them. So I'm just going to hand over to Ganesh, who's got a few slides to present, and then we'll open it up for questions.
Right. Can everybody see that on full screen?
Yeah.
Excellent. And thank you for that introduction, Rowan. And the other thing to say, as with Rowan and a number of you on the call, I was Assistant Director for the Applied Research Collaboration North West London for 16 years. So I've worked with Rowan for all those 16 years. So many of you will know me from that. So I've got a reasonably good understanding of North West London and how that operates. So I'll be talking about my experience. And today really is, I've sort of broken the presentation down into two parts. One is really at the beginning thinking, why do people from our diverse communities not trust us, not trust statutory services, why they might not be interested in research trials. So it's thinking about that and the current environment. Some of the events that have happened over the last 2 weeks have intensified that. So I sort of brought the presentation bang up to date to talk about that. And then the second bit, which is a more hopeful bit, which looks at what we've actually done over the last 4 years to increase diversity in research trials. So first bit is saying it's pretty difficult. Second bit is saying actually you can do it if you think about it, and you can do it really well. So that's sort of plan. I have got a few slides, but I'm not one of these people who insists on going through all of them. So if we want to break into a discussion at any point, you want to throw a question at me, just call it out, and I'll happily take that question. We can have a debate, or we can just speak about things at the end. But this is supposed to be interactive, so feel free to jump in. So today I'm talking about the Integrated Care System Research Engagement Network Programme and our Community Research Champion Project. Has that gone on to the next slide for everybody, by the way? Does that work? Yeah. So the big question is like, why do our people from our diverse communities, why are they less trusting of the establishment? And the reason why this question is important is if our communities, our diverse communities, treat statutory services as one big amorphous blob, so education, health, social services, immigration, police, that all generally do bad things to them, why would they sign up for a research trial or to be involved in research? So I think that's what we're faced with. We ourselves may have come into the NHS for all of the right reasons, trying to help people, but we do need to reflect on how we are perceived by the communities we serve. So some of the issues, the anti-immigrant sentiment in society and the media, whole communities being blamed for the acts of very bad individuals. There was a report on the NHS called Snowy White Peaks, which talked about how at the lower levels of the NHS we're incredibly diverse. Once you get up to chief executive level, it is like Snowy White Peaks. So if you don't see yourself reflected in senior leadership, do you trust that organisation? Systematic racism, stop and search, um, the higher rates of young black men in the psychiatric system and on secure wards, and they're the least likely to be referred to counselling. Whereas if you're a white woman, you're most likely to be referred to counselling at the softer end of the psychiatric system. So it's very important also to think about intersectionality, because it's not just about ethnicity, it's about education, it's about gender, it's about class. All of these things are all sort of mixed in. And why in a modern society are black women 4 times more likely than white women to die of pregnancy and childbirth? Um, and a lot to do with that, I think, is about pain. And you can't see pain. You can see a broken leg, whether it's sickle cell, mental health, pain that women go through childbirth. If you believe that a black person can experience more pain um, before they need the appropriate drugs, you're likely to get worse outcomes. So that is the sort of background, and and if we look at what's happened over the last 2 weeks, it's not just from our most deprived populations that are feeling worried. I can tell you, as a middle class South Asian man who was born here, I know my family are worried about how they're treated, the general negative perception of people who aren't white in society. And then this quote from this is somebody who's had his house burnt out in Belfast the other day. I will never get over watching my home of 13 years burnt down. But that is the environment we're working in at the moment. And that actually impacts on whether somebody trusts you to go into a research trial. So that's not your fault, but you need to be mindful of it. So if anything, the program I'm talking about, we started it 4 years ago. I would say the environment to recruit people from our diverse communities has got significantly harder in the last 4 years. And even the last 2 weeks, I would say things are worse than they were a month ago. So, what does that look like? So, my own son there, he wrote this Guardian article, and he wrote this, I can't remember, it was last summer. So things are worse now than they were a year ago. And he talks about my family's experience of racism, his experience of racism. And up until about a year ago, 2 years ago, he hadn't never, he's going to be 21 in September. He'd never experienced racism, but now he does. He's got a big political left wing Instagram account, 750,000 people on that. I spoke to him the other day. So yeah, I got about 200 racist messages the other day after the events in Northern Ireland. So this is really sort of playing out. And if you look at what some of our politicians are saying, so Farage on the cold rage, pure cold rage, even though the family of the victim said this is about a bad person, this is not about communities. And then if you look at Restore Britain, who are on the far right, but quotes like this, you wouldn't be able to say this type of stuff about 10 years ago. I want people finally held to account for what has been done to our country, civil servants, judges, politicians, if they have knowingly placed unvetted, dangerous, third world savages. So that's anybody brown. He's actually described as savages in our communities near our children. You wouldn't be, unless you were National Front BNP, you wouldn't be able to say that in the past. But people are sort of openly saying that. And then even to the left of reform is the Conservatives. But, if you read that piece there, like John Garst, he's a sketch writer in the Guardian. I mean, I'll read it out to you. This is how it plays out. You know how it is. You're middle class, straight, white man in his 60s in A&E, possibly the most disadvantaged person in the country. You complain of chest pains. In the adjoining triage queue, there's a black woman with what looks like a broken toe. You know what happens next. The black woman is seen within minutes while you have your cardiac arrest in the waiting room. And then he puts, said no one ever. But that is what Kemi Badenoch is talking about, that all of us have got so blinded by EDI that we are only looking after the needs of black and brown people. And if you look at all those figures I've just shown you, that's clearly not the case. And also, if you add up Conservatives, Reform, Restore, and other far right, that is now 50% of the voter base in this country. So if you're like me and you're brown, you don't feel particularly confident about some of the other people living in this country and their sort of views. And if we cast our mind back to the COVID pandemic, where I thought at the end was really, despite the horror of the pandemic, there was a positive feeling which I hadn't experienced within the NHS before, where I thought lots of people were coming together because they'd seen so many people from black and minority ethnic communities die who were both in the community and staff, NHS staff. There was a real thing, how can this happen in our modern country? We must do something to engage our diverse communities. And actually, all of that, we've just gone back. We're going back to the 70s and 80s. That's what it feels like as a person of colour. But if you look at this table I've just sort of made up looking on some of the data from COVID, if you think about it, the only thing protector if you're in a minority ethnic group is generally minority ethnic groups have younger populations than the white population. On all of these other indicators, your outcomes, if you got COVID, were likely to be worse, right? So male, female, that's 50-50, so that's nothing. But are you more likely to have an underlying health condition if you're from ethnic minority? Yes. Are you likely to be in a low working class, have a contact job? Are you more likely to be a Uber driver, a bus driver? So that's more negative. Are you more likely to have less money? Are you more likely to live in an urban area? Are you more likely to live in overcrowded housing? Are you more likely to live in an intergenerational household? All of those things result in more negative outcomes from COVID than if you're white UK. So when you look at this graph, and this was only 4 years ago, 2022 when COVID pandemic ended, there is real data here showing there is difference between health outcomes and ethnicity. And the other thing to think about when we're engaging with our sort of diverse communities and our white working class communities who don't get a great service either is look at the living standards and look at, so I grew up in the 70s and 80s, started working in the 90s, and you look at the first, sort of 20 years, everybody was doing quite well. Incomes were going up significantly. Go to 2010s, it's 9%. But then when you look at my kids, so they're 21, 18, 13, look at what's happening now. You've got either negative or hardly any improvement in the living standards. So this is having a real impact on our communities who are struggling with heating and eating. And if we want to engage people in research trials, we've got to understand this graph. Because if you can't provide something for those people, then why should they engage with you? Why should they trust you? So anyway, that's that's the background. So that's a bit sad. There's not a lot of positive in there. But this is what we have tried to deliver over the last 4 years. It's called the ICS REN, stands for Integrated Care System Research Engagement Network. The aim was to increase diversity in research trials. And what we wanted to do was have something that really impacted on the community. So instead of focus on research, as I've just said, heating and eating, that's the things that people are most interested in. We had various research roadshows where all of the support groups you could think about, there's food banks, warm banks, mental health advice, citizens advice. We had a load of support network in there. So there's a reason for people to step into a community centre. They would get something directly from it. Then they could have a health check. They may not have had a health check for ages, and then after that, if they're still there, they could talk about research once you've built up that level of trust. And we'd also been working with community research champions from the same local areas, and they would talk people through it. So they sounded like them, they looked like them. And we mainly worked in at the start the the boroughs of Brent, Ealing, Hillingdon, and Hounslow. And what we did over the 4 years is gradually expand from that. So we started to look at hypertension, prostate cancer, children and young people, and really listen to the communities and then feed back to them. So we were working on areas that they were interested in. And I know I was getting money from all different sources, but to a community member, it looked like we had a consistent program over 4 years. So that's where you need to build a trusting relationship. You've got to be in there for the long haul, not just for 1 year. So when we look at what the programs delivered, we had 38 roadshows, over 3,000 community members attended those roadshows, 1,200 health checks were undertaken, and 258 people actually signed up directly onto research trials. And 75% of people who attended those roadshows who filled in a form said they'd be willing to take part in research. And I've sort of covered most of that already. So I think this slide is really important slide. So when we first started doing roadshows in the second wave, we were looking at target black men. So the first one, 40 people attended, but through using quality improvement methods and improving what we were doing, we ended the last one, 220 black men turned up to the event. And they were clearly saying prostate cancer was a significant issue for them. They were worried about it. They were having to ask 4 or 5 times to get a PSA test. So if you don't know, if you're African, Caribbean, black background, you're far more likely to have prostate cancer than if you're white or if you're South Asian. How is it I can ask for my PSA test and I'm actually South Asians are less likely to get prostate cancer than white community. I get it straight away. But if you're a black man in Brent, you're actually really struggling with this. So the important thing about that is we then presented these findings to the what was then the old ICB's Health Inequality group. And they said, oh, we've got a strategy. I said, well, you may have a strategy, but it's not working in these GP practices. You need to do something about it. And then I had a meeting with the chair of that group, who was also chief executive of Hounslow Council at the time. So I can tell black men, I've actually pushed this as far as I can from my position. And the other interesting thing is we developed a partnership forum, which was chaired by Patrick Vernon. And recently, as you know, they've decided not to expand prostate cancer screening for black men. It's only people with specific genetic issues. But he actually went to the meeting with the new health minister to actually voice black people's concerns. So we can say we have taken your thoughts from Brent workshop to the Secretary of State for Health. Now, what that does is when you tell that story back, is then people start to trust you. You know, they've actually done something with what we said. It's like, you said we did. And I think that's very important with research. When you're trying to build up trust, you have to listen and then you've got to do something with that information. And we all know we can't fix everything, but you can do the best within your sphere of influence. And I think it's really important. Think about what is your sphere of influence. Then I really like this infographic. So we also work with children, young people, and what we try and do is give them something that they can use straight away. So as you're having a workshop about research, about health research, we've got artists drawing this graphic up. And this is not an easy to reach youth association, right? The kids who go to this are victims of knife crime and perpetrators of knife crime. And we were able to come up with this. And guess what? At the end of the hour session, whatever, they can take a photo of it on their phones. They've got something straight away which describes their feelings. They don't have to wait for 4 years for a Lancet article, which they don't care about. And if you look at the bottom right hand corner, I think this is a really poignant quote. If people properly explained, we might trust them. And I think we've all got to give ourselves a long, hard look at ourselves. Have we properly explained stuff to our communities? And if we did, they might trust us. And if we did that, then they may be more up for being part of research trials. So this is my last slide just before I finish. So it's just some quotes from some stakeholders. Um, people have been involved. So we advised 3 people who had a health check out of, I think it's 1,200, to go directly to A&E because they were at a risk of, they weren't having a heart attack, but they could have a heart attack at any moment. So if we hadn't picked them up, they could have carried walking around Northwest London until they had a heart attack. So it makes me feel good that we've actually maybe saved a few people's lives. But when you feed that back to community and say, well, what have you ever done for us? So, well, 3 of your people, we picked them up and they've gone to A&E and they're probably alive now. They may have died. And that really resonates. There is something about being able to tell a compelling narrative, which I think in healthcare we need to get far better at if we're going to engage our communities. And these are some of the quotes from some of the participants. Suffering is easier than asking for help. If that is the perception in the community, what's the chance of anybody signing up to a research trial? If only they'd explained, we might have trusted them. If it's not been developed with us, it's not for us. And you've got some of our children, young people in our old YPAD group. And then the strongest public health impact is when professionals treated them as people, not as patients. You're starting to perceive the community as assets as opposed to as things wrong with them that we need to fix. So I will stop sharing then and hand over to questions.
Great. Thank you so much, Ganesh. Really interesting. Any questions? Craig, go ahead.
Hi. Thanks, Ganesh. It's really interesting. So I'm going to Belfast tonight. My mum lives there, and my wife is a person of color. She's South American, and she's not coming with me, and I support her in that because she's not really comfortable. And I just think it's a very humiliating and embarrassing and sad state of affairs that the sort of extremes of society have gone back to some of these ways. I mean, I won't get into it too deeply, but when the Troubles were there, like, we were killing each other. The other was the same color, but it was a different religion. But now it's almost like they've needed to find another other to sort of express this onto. But my hope is that I've already seen examples of messages where people on WhatsApp groups, etc., like there's Indian physicians in Northern Ireland, and I'm quite encouraged that they're sort of like bonding together and looking at ways that they might be able to respond, and also for the vast majority of people to be able to start to respond and mobilize and be able to see that, like, this is happening and this is the effect of it and what can we do about it. So I mean, I'm trying to be hopeful about how things can actually change as a result of this. That was just my statement on that, really, to be
Yeah.
honest. But I've also got a
Look,
question about your work,
yeah, go on.
which included that. When you, the Brent Roadshow stuff that you had where you went
Yeah.
from 40 people to 220, I thought that was really interesting. Were you able to get information and messaging and around how trust was built? Like what messages were shared amongst peers, how that stuff about if things were properly explained, were you able to gather stuff that helped to inform approaches like later on that maybe could help us?
So I think the key learning from that is you need to go through people. So there's a bunch of people, really well-respected people in the community, black men who have had prostate cancer and survived, who have become major advocates and are well-known community figures. So we got them to come down and speak. And once you do that, you almost get the associated trust because they trust them. They're coming to your event, then they trust you. Do you see what I mean?
Yeah.
Because those people wouldn't come to an event if they didn't think the event was going to be run right. So we really reached out to those people, got them to speak. We also used community radio as well in Brent. Um, and all of these type of things sort of snowballed, and via word of mouth, WhatsApp, it actually created this huge number, which was fantastic to see. And also for the guy, many of us from sort of diverse communities, if we're men of a certain age, find it a bit hard to sort of open up. But people were talking about really personal things. And another story from that event, we also, I don't know if you've heard of the cancer van. There's a van that can come round and it can sort of test you for cancer. There was one person who went to the van at that event, and they found out they had late stage prostate cancer, and they were treated probably within 2 months of being tested. So that person didn't know they had prostate cancer. So that person could have died if it wasn't for that event. That is a really powerful story for the
Yeah.
community.
Yeah.
Once you start talking about stuff like that, then you think, oh, I'm on side. I don't want to die. You know, So I think it's about listening to the community. Who are the people the community really trust? And it's often not us. So we often work through I sort of skimmed over that a little bit because I didn't want to talk all the time. Is using the voluntary sector. They know who are the most trusted people or the most trusted voluntary sector organisations in a certain community. Get those people in. That is a key. And then just circling back to what you initially said around Northern Ireland, one of the hopeful things I come out from Northern Ireland, I think because you have been through the troubles and it was so bad, many of the politicians have been condemning it in a way that probably didn't happen in England, I felt. And it does feel that there is a small minority causing the trouble. And a lot of this is stoked up from Elon Musk. And
Yeah.
people don't live in Northern Ireland, don't understand it. And they are just saying everything's really bad from far, far away. And there are no controls on in X anymore. Essentially, you can say nasty stuff that a Nazi would say on X, and that's fine now. And we're just looking at can we control X a little bit around a bit about pornography or, images of women. I think we need to go a lot further, you know.
Yeah.
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 So
So yeah,
if I can move to Simone now, who
yeah,
has a
sorry.
question. Simone, and I'll
Thanks.
come
Yeah,
to Sophie.
perfect. Really good work, and it's good to see, obviously, the positive impacts that you've had in the roadshow. I guess my kind of question is how do you embed the positive work into more long-term sustainability and system change? Because part of the problem is obviously there is mistrust, but I guess the other kind of elephant in the room is people have mistrust right now because the system is still a problem, and we are targeting the mistrust of the community. Are There's then a responsibility that we're not blindsiding them to trust a system that is still very broken and actually isn't working in their favor.
I think that's a really good point. I think it's about being honest. So all of those, and like, how do you get people to trust you? You're sort of honest with them, like those figures, like that stuff at the beginning like I'll present that to communities, So I think that helps. I mean, to be honest, there was, when was it? About 3 years ago, myself and a colleague. So obviously I'm South Asian, my other colleague, mixed race, South African guy, really quite a big guy. And we went out to a community event, and first up were the police, and they were talking about violence against women and stop and search. And the community absolutely gave them both barrels, and the police officers there, to their credit, were really nice police officers. They're doing their best, but no, that's a hard, it's not an easy thing to go out to one of our communities if you're a policeman, a white policeman, and when a lot of stuff isn't great in policing. So I was thinking, I'm really glad they went first. We're the NHS. We're going to just walk this after the police. We're the good guys. We're like the angels. And so if the police got 10 out of 10 of rollicking, I would say we got 8 out of 10 for all of the reasons what you've just said behind your question. Yeah. So that was a bit of an eye opener for me, because I thought, are we only just a bit better than police? I thought you know what I mean? But that's why I said at the beginning, the communities often see us with one big blob, which generally does bad things to them. So I think we have to really work on that. And then the other problem is things are changing so much. Like the ICB has changed. I mean, ARC, the organisation used to employ me, has ceased to exist. But on the good side, we've still managed to keep this ICS REM program going, and we've got another year's funding. So I think there is hope, but you do have to try and embed it. But when you say embed it, you've got to embed it in a constantly changing environment. You know, Even if everything I'd done had been completely embedded in the old ICB, that's been completely ripped up now. So you've got to start again, and that's what we are doing. So I think it almost becomes like painting the fourth bridge, right? You never stop. This is a never ending thing. We will always be working on it, I see. um, did that answer your question?
I guess probably the question I asked doesn't really have an answer, otherwise I guess it would be fixed. It's just like an interesting point that obviously we do what's within our gift, and obviously what you're doing is within your gift, but it's just how you mitigate that risk that actually, you say, the NHS is maybe a lesser evil to the police, to global majority communities, but there still are bad practices that are failing the global communities. So it's like we building trust in a system that shouldn't be trusted, and how do you in take responsibility to enable people to not just blindly trust the system, to engage with it, but have the tools to advocate for yourself in a system that isn't actually designed to support them because of how they look.
Yeah, no, I agree. So one of the things I haven't said, so I was a trustee of a sickle cell society for 9 years, and I've sort of stopped about a year ago. So if you look at a group of people who are not seen, who are not delivered good services, who the community probably shouldn't trust, it's if you've got sickle cell. So you probably know about Evan Nathan Smith, who had sickle cell, got admitted to a hospital in North London, was not put on a haematology ward, but was so concerned about the care he was getting, phoned 999 from his hospital bed for help in a hospital, and then he died. And then at the inquest, it said, well, if we had if he had been given the appropriate treatment, he'd have probably would have survived. And then, well, what did we do? We had the all-party parliamentary group, No One's Listening. And then that showed it wasn't just one person, it was the general experience of the community. And to be fair, that did lead to some change. And there were new attempted, well, like sort of specialist sickle cell centres set up. None of them were 24 hours. That was a hope, but better than what we had. Very much on the lines of stroke. But again, this whole point you make about change, that was, we were actually making quite a bit of progress, right? But the day that NHS England was abolished, they were leading on all of that. And since then, it's all gone backwards. So that's nothing to do with sickle cell. That's just a strategic decision that Wes Streeting took to get rid of NHS England. But it's had a really negative impact on the advances we've made for people with sickle cell. So often this constant change thing is not helping, and you can't embed it, but you have to keep going. And what I would say is you've got to think about your sphere of influence. We can't fix the world, right? But you can fix within your influence. And that's enough. And if you speak to your community and you said, I've done everything I can. Now, I know I can say that to a community member. If you can say that, then people are sensible. They know you're not God. You can't do everything. But it's being honest with them about what you can do and what you can't do. That builds trust.
So on this note, you've just kind of touched on some of the stuff that Sophie had added into the chat. She's on a train and coming in and out of connection. So I'm going to read her question, if that's all right, Sophie.
Yeah, sure.
So she says, I hear you read trust. It takes time and that it's a long-term project. You mentioned you had funding for 4 years, which is amazing. But in a time of non-recurrent funding and funding that is 12 to 24 months, what golden nuggets can we take that would build success in terms of tapping into communities and developing relationships for true co-production? So that's kind of touching on some of the stuff you were just saying.
No, that's a really good point. So all of the money we've got is year on year, financial year. But what I was able to do is package it up into a program. So so I know I'm getting the money from all different places, and it's only going to last one financial year. But if I'm continually successful, I treat it as a program, and I have a long-term perspective about what we're doing. So until the money stops, we can keep going, and that's what we've been able to do. So I would say, even if you're on recurrent money, if you can turn that into a program, then you're able to do it. Now, obviously, not every funding bid is going to be successful. So that may not always happen. But we were able to do that. I think we generally perceived North West London to be one of the leading edge ICS REM programs in the country. I mean, they asked me to speak at the RDF conference, 900 people there for their closing session. So that's pretty good. But I'm not saying any of this is easy. But the ideal world is you get money from various different sources and you have a, what's it called? Mixed portfolio of funding. So you've always got a bit of money. And guess what? The ARC's finished, which used to fund me entirely. And I'm still doing this 1 day a week. So
is it that idea of the community see the swan serene on the top of the water,
exactly,
and underneath
yes.
There's lots of paddling feet trying to get the money and keep it going?
They don't need to know that. They absolutely don't. Our job is to get the money and then deliver the program. But if the program is constant, they don't know money nearly ran out 2 weeks to go. I know, but they don't. So yeah, absolutely, that's a good analogy.
Yeah. And one of the questions, anybody got any other questions? I have a question just about area, because you talked about a Brent Roadshow. Does it work just in London? Is it extending out of London into the Thames Valley? Where is the limit?
So the ICS REM program is all across England. So every ICB will be able to access it. And it's like anything, some are better than others. So there should be some ICS REM funding for all of England. Obviously, the ICB changes haven't helped, and some areas may not have received funding this year because their proposals weren't strong enough. So the idea is we keep telling people about it, people pick up the ideas, and then we build them into future research and improvement projects.
Great. Any other questions from anyone? Just while we've got a few minutes left. I was just wondering where, obviously, there's a lot of communities within London, and if it's funded through the ICB, was it just Northwest London? But now the ICB is merged with North Thames, haven't they? So does that now include Newham in the ICB that's funded you?
So the new ICB is all of the 8 boroughs of the original Northwest London, plus Camden and Islington and places like that. So I think it's Hackney as well, but not Newham. Newham is outside that part of IC. That's counted as East London. So the way it's set up at the moment is we've got one combined ICB with 2 arms. One is called the Northwest London arm, which myself and Natasha work on. And then the other one is the North Central, which Lizzie Stimpson works on, but she's actually based at the ICB and she's sort of the overall lead for the whole thing. So we've kept it going, which is good, you know. And we're looking at Natasha and I have just come out of a meeting where we're looking at ICS Rent Commercial, so maybe a bit more money, you know. So you've got sort of, and that's with a partnership with Paddington Life Sciences and various big pharma agent organisations. So that may bring us some more money. So you need to be reasonably agile and reasonably creative in this type of field to keep the money flowing.
I'm wondering, Shadrach, if I can call on you. I know the ACE project, obviously you've been working with the community, and I'm just wondering, like, do you see this as similar work, or are you there, Shadrach?
Yes, I am. I think the model is really interesting. I was really impressed by how the connections with the communities was set up in terms of getting people in the community involved in deciding actions, and sort of, so that at the end people were feeling heard and involved in the process. I thought that was really interesting, and it's a similar model to what we're doing, which involves, I mean, our participants are mostly people living with dementia, and to do that requires a lot of time spent with people and families, which sometimes is not accounted for in research, unfortunately, but it's a very important part of trying to spend more time to build relationships with people and get people to trust you, to feel that they can tell you their story, which sometimes might not be appreciated in a story, in a sort of in a research process that has a beginning and an end, where we want to go in and collect the data and walk away, when most of the time we have to spend is building that relationship before people can actually share their experiences. So there are some synergies. I can see synergies in the approaches, and I'll be interested in building on those.
Because I know you also have champions, don't you? I just saw something in our newsletter that came out for our university about the African Caribbean Elders Project, the ACE project, collaborating with community champions. Are they similar to the research champions that Ganesh was talking about?
Yes, something similar. And what we tend to do is to empower these people, to get them to, I think it's us going in as researchers, knowing that we are not the experts. We don't know these communities, but people that we work with have a better understanding and relationship with them. And if we get them on board, it becomes easier for us to do the work. I mean, we had this conference called Dementia in Color, where I was the only academic speaker there. Everybody else was a professional, but comes with a caring responsibility. There were South Asian speakers, and people from African Caribbean background, who have all got their own jobs and their own professions, but they're also caring for a parent living with dementia. And what we did was getting them to tell their stories on their own, rather than us having to recount stories on their behalf. And that way, that was quite a powerful way of doing it, and that people kept thinking we don't have to be sort of, we don't want to hear sort of summarized stories, but hearing it from people and how that has impacted their careers and has impacted their everyday lives was actually more powerful. And through that, we can then recruit other people to participate in our research. So that was quite a useful way of building relationships and engaging with people.
Shadrick, that sounds really interesting. It'd be good to sort of catch up with you offline
Definitely.
about that. One of the other things which I'm working in my new job is developing a homeless research strategy for healthcare central London. And one of the things they've done with it's a research collaboration between HCL and Helix was to look at the needs or look at the experiences of homeless women using health services, but they did that through the form of art. So the women create their own art which described their experience. So we've got an actual physical art in the form of art gallery plus an online version of that. But I think that's an example of of using different methods, and particularly if we're engaging different communities with complex needs and complexity, we need to be really creative. That's on us.
Mm.
Not just to do a standard questionnaire, like thinking about, well, actually, art for homeless women may be brilliant, um, but it's still research, and thinking outside of our box. So, what research really works for our communities, as opposed to what research works for us, and having that bottom up approach, I think, is really good.
Mm. Definitely.
Any other questions? Any last questions? We've just got a few moments left. No question is too small or too stupid. It's all just about figuring out how we can all work better together. Go on, Lauren.
Hi, Ganesh. I was just going to say thank you for that talk. It was really insightful, and I completely working within the borough sort of Hounslow. I completely understand where you're coming from, where people sort of think, oh, why isn't the Asian population getting involved in research? Well, actually, they've got bigger things to worry about than being on your sodding research study. Leave them alone. Because I recently put in a bid to try and get more funding from a study based on our population. And if anyone has a chance, if you go onto the London Borough of Hounslow's council site and have a look at the stats, they are really heartbreaking when you look at how people are living within the borough, the income, housing, all those things. And you just think, of course, they're not going to blimmin' answer your text about a research study. They might not even have credit on their phone because they might not have a phone contract. Like it's a lot. And just say, obviously, I can see all the amazing work you've done, and it's stuff that we're trying to get with women's health in the area as well, to talk to community leaders. And but as you say, it's funding, isn't it? There's only so much we can do in a day. So it'd be really interesting to see where your projects and things go. And if you are going to get women's health sort of invested within that as well and encompass it, because I know that Natasha Singh, who you know, and Archana Dixit have done a lot of good work on that. So it might be good to have you involved as well, because I could see how these conditions such as diabetes in the Asian population, the amazing work that you've done with the prostate cancer, you could probably sort of use some of your amazing skills in getting the women engaged in that as well. So it'd just be really interesting as to where you go next, because I know there's a lot of interesting stakeholders here that would be happy to collaborate.
Yeah, no, I'm really keen. And with Natasha Singh, who's a good friend, at the moment, me and Sophie are just desperate to meet with her.
Oh, she's a
So
busy woman, isn't
I
she? She's very
know, so it's
difficult to
really
track
hard. So
down,
we
is
keep, she said,
Natasha.
yeah, I'd love to meet with you. We just need to get a date in the diary. So if you can help facilitate that, Lauren, I'd be greatly
I'll see if I
appreciative
can
of
get hold
you.
of her rota so we can just pop in before a clinic
Yeah, no,
starts,
I'd be really
which is what
keen.
I
So
did to her before. I was like, I know where you are today, Natasha. I'm
you know,
coming.
like Sophie and
Mm.
I, we've been really trying very hard. I've been what's up in her on her personal phone, and I've still not got a date. So yeah,
Yeah,
anything you could do to facilitate that would be brilliant.
no problem. I'll see what I can do.
So that's the great thing about this network. Sometimes it's all of those connections, isn't it? Making connections through people that get you far further than if you were just constantly saying, please can I have a meeting.
And the other thing to say is just a general point. So at the moment, I'm sort of working 3 days a week. So if you are interested in taking up some of these ideas and maybe applying for some funding together or to
Mm.
work on a project with you, I'm available. currently.
No worries. I'll have
So,
a look into things and see what
so
we're
yeah,
doing.
so
Yeah.
you know, so I'm available to work, guys. So, so yeah, happy to be involved in anything like this. Obviously, you can see it's quite a big passion of mine, and we've got a lot of experience, and particularly in Northwest London. So yeah. So do reach out to me. I think on my slides it's got my LinkedIn and stuff, but you can. I've got a reasonably unique name, so I'm quite easy to find.
Same. There's not many Trepties roaming around either. So, yeah.
Brilliant.
Right,
Thank you
perfect.
so much. Any last questions before we finish up? So thank you so much, Ganesh. It's been really interesting to hear all of the great stuff you've been doing in the ICS. And obviously we will put this recording on the microsite. So again, if you have other colleagues who would be interested in a lot of this work, you can send them the link and they'll be able to see that. Also, obviously, this is a community of practice. So we're very much kind of looking to build a community that comes together regularly. So if you'd like to join us or present at the next one, we have generally online meetings monthly. Do let us know. Contact Craig, Sophie, Lauren, Julie, our Knowledge Mobilisation Fellows, if you'd like to present in July or in autumn. We generally don't have one in August because there's nobody around and nobody comes. But if you would like to, we'd really be interested in hearing from you, and it would be great to kind of see you at our next meeting. Craig, Lauren, when is the next meeting? I should probably have looked before I started talking, but
I don't know if we have a date yet, but
I
we'll
think we're
circulate it
like,
as soon as we do.
yeah, finalising it because it might be one of my lovely
Finalising.
colleagues talking about some of the amazing work she's doing in gynecology and
Brilliant.
non-surgical options for
Excellent.
fibroids.
So we have a few kind of lined up through autumn, but again, if you'd like to kind of come and speak and engage with the community, you can come with a kind of, this is what I've done so far, and I'm really interested in hearing your views on how I can solve this problem or how I can deal with this challenge. It is very much meant to be kind of like a useful thing rather than any kind of presenting shop. But it was really useful, Ganesh, to hear all of the work you're doing, and I think it's kind of sparked quite a lot of ideas for people in the group. So thanks very much. It was great for you to have you to join us.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Cheers.
Great.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye. Go on, Shadrach. Did you want to? Shadrach raised his hand then, but no.